Hello, I'm Michael, and this is Tarot by the Tree. Uh, Specifically, we're working through the minor arcana now, or the pips. These are the four suits of Ace to King. We've gone through the staffs, which is our enterprise and plans, and today we're finishing up cups, which is the sign of happiness and joy. This is the King of Cups. We see him participating in the realm of Keter. See the tree here, the page, knight, queen, and king all participate in different areas. That's what we're looking at right now anyway, and the king is participating in Keter. So we're going to take a bit of a review. The cups, we're finishing up the suit of cups, which all of them have something to do with an aspect of joy. As we progress through this suit, we've come across some things that are hard to nail down or define absolutely. Let's take a look at happiness. We'll call it joy. Maybe there's a good and a bad joy. Maybe there's a kind of a happiness that's transient, potentially destructive, a kind of a wild joy that may not lead anywhere. And perhaps there's a better joy that involves compassion and love, and perhaps the building of some kind of foundation. And we mentioned, what about inebriation as a source of joy? And that's not what we're talking about. We also talked a little bit about contagious joy, and the kind of joy that is not necessarily from deep in your own spirit, but may be accented by crowds, such as sports or some forms of religion, where the audience goes through changes in their personality during that performance or during that service. We'll get back to the king. It's hard to fully understand kings because it's very difficult to see a king anymore, because we see actors now. And it may be that true kings aren't the type to be as visible as they used to. And we'll try to bring that point across a little bit. A king is a savior. A king is a uniter, a protector, and an example of honorable action. These people stood out like skyscrapers amongst bungalows back in the day. They are strong. Strength is an absolute part of their essence. They're a benevolent leader. These are not dictators. And everybody follows the king out of choice, as if a recognition of his path being the best path to follow. Just to pick a number, let's say he's one in 1,000 strong men. Still, you wouldn't even have a good king all the time. And you can't replace a king. You just can't go out and get king number 2. These are rare and wonderful beings. You or me, we would be instantly impressed when in the presence of a real king. This is a non-contestable thing. This is as if you had met a superhero. It's a self-evident thing, and people agree on it. This is not like we have today, and it's different. We have cinema, politics, celebrity status, and these things create those feelings in us and make us think that these are kings and queens of people, but of course they're not. And I don't know where they are. I'm sure they're still amongst us, and you'd be very fortunate if you met one and you would recognize him immediately. If we go back to the archetypical times that the cards were drawn for, we enter a time when a person was only known by their actions. That's a big difference from today. They were only known by their actions. And the spin off from that one simple fact is quite huge. Um, Maybe from looking at happiness, we start to see that the true nature of the highest happiness involves planning and preparation for the future. It's a happiness that doesn't die yesterday. It's something that carries on. Because you're planning for the future and it hasn't happened yet, you are therefore using your imagination. The water sign in cups has a sign of imagination, maybe just an understanding that true happiness does involve more than what's going on around you today, and it does involve some preparation for tomorrow. The zone of the King of Cups is water and imagination, and we'll describe the card. There is no land in sight. I think that makes this card quite unusual just on that point alone. A king, obviously a king, he sits upon a throne, and the throne is like an island. He wears a long sea blue robe. His cloak and crown are golden colored, trimmed in scarlet. An amulet shaped like a fish hangs from a chain around his neck, and his feet are clad in some sort of footwear made out of green scales. In one hand, he has a cup, and he has the royal mace in the other. In the background, on the left side, a fish leaps. On the right side, a distant ship struggles with the waves. Despite the turbulent sea, those waves do not affect the king or the platform that he sits on. In a reading, I would aim for something like this. You have encountered a king, an amazing leader has come into your life. People feel hope, happiness, and safety when he is present. He brings a world of constructive imagination to his people. This is a type of leader where those who follow are free to dream. They're also free to do things that were not done before. And again, this is where the imagination and the subconscious comes in. The advice on meeting someone like this is to trust them and follow them. They are wise, strong, and your happiness is part of what they are trying to do. When we go back to this ancient time, it's a time when kings were gifts to the people, and they were not replaceable. The reputation of an ancient king was built on his actual accomplishments. The accomplishments of a true king can seem at times superhuman. That's partly why in old movies you can see people get so upset if their reputation was threatened at all, because that's all people had was their actions, and they stood behind those actions. And hearsay was not given a whole lot of credence, although I'm sure gossip was as prevalent then as it is now. Kings must rise to the rank. They are recognized. That's something that happened way back when. Kings must rise to the rank, and they are recognized. Kingship cannot be inherited because the nature of a king isn't necessarily passed on. Being a king is not a result of a popular vote. That doesn't produce kings. That produces temporarily popular people. The king is not a forced government. Of course, at first there is the element of gaining land and conquering, but the king will be accepted and proclaimed because he's offering a better society. And as we've seen, that's especially through his contact with the queen. I don't think this is a great analogy, but you can think of a king of old like a fine racehorse, a thoroughbred racehorse in his prime in a herd of Mustangs. There is no doubt who's faster. There is no doubt. It is an obvious thing. This isn't just one of the regular horses that's a bit stronger. This is an order of magnitude difference. The place on the tree, and this gets really interesting. The king suffers a weakness that the queen doesn't have, and it's a real thing. The place on the tree of the king is in Keter, and the aspect of Keter is the magician. All things are possible. All the four suits are on the table. On the tree of knowledge, we see that the magician can sometimes be mistaken for the hangman. And the hangman is a person not in any great physical danger, but he is not respected by the crowd. And in fact, he might even be punished or kept at arm's length from most people because they don't accept his wisdom, although it's very clear they're the same person. He is still wise, but sometimes a king won't be followed. Now, this is very unusual, and it would take a number of reasons for that to happen, but it's just the king walks a thin line at times, and it reminds us of the card of the emperor, which is the king of kings, and the other side of the emperor, when bathed in adoration for a long time, will become the devil. This is not a satanic devil. This has nothing to do with the biblical idea of God and the devil. The devil is a form of bedevilment where a person's wants and interests become a little bit perverted by virtue of adoration. The king is vulnerable, but he is mighty, and he's always welcomed by the people. Why don't we look at some of the questions?
Yesterday, we spoke of the differences between men and women, male and female, and how male and female characteristics are shared by both genders.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about that often generally speaking, men are more product oriented,
yeah.
Whereas females tend to have a more divergent approach to a situation where
and we didn't cover that, the divergent convergent aspect, I think. And I know, maybe I'm interrupting. Okay. No. I know that even when we work around, I'm only comfortable doing one thing at a time. And when that's done, I'll look at something else. And you're constantly saying, okay, but before we do this, it would be better if this was done. And as this is being done, and you're a divergent thinker, which, by the way, is a sign of intelligence, is divergent thinking. And women are more divergent thinking. But anyway, that's one of the struggles we have sometimes, where I want to look under a microscope and you want to have a wide view lens.
Because I think of smoothing the waters ahead.
Yeah,
because
can't argue.
When something is done and then it's like, oh, I have to redo this because I forgot about that. And so together, however, when we work together, it works well.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is the king alone in the middle of the lake or sea?
There he is, in the sign of water, aspect of imagination, and he is alone. He's untouchable. He is immersed, yet he's not immersed, but he is surrounded with the intent of planning for the future and imagining a future that may be better than anything he's ever known.
Why does the king have an ordinary cup and not an ornate chalice like the queen?
The king is king of cups, and all the cups in the suit are like the king's. And all these people are doing the best they can to muddle along towards an unknown, uncertain future. The queen is in the suit of Tiferet, which is beauty and love. The water flows at her feet. The cup is an incredible imagination, a wild imagination. Her cup examines all the possibilities, all the potentials, almost to an absurd level. But that's how she examines everything and doesn't just accept a future as a consequence of what's happening now, which would be the king. She imagines a future that, again, could be better than any present anyone had ever known up to that point.
And an example of divergence and
Absolutely, I hadn't thought of that. The king is much more limited in his cup, where she's
smoothing the waters ahead.
again. Yeah, that's right. And the waters, well, the waters around her are much smoother, and they're much rougher around the king.
Is he alone at sea for his own protection?
No, the king needs no protection. This is symbolic. The realm he's in is the water, and only fish are really comfortable there. The ship in the distance is having trouble with the waves, and there's a strange coloration to the ship that makes you think that it could be in some kind of trouble.
Well, could you elaborate on that? That was one of the questions. Why is the ship, like, why is that depicted? A ship in tumultuous waters.
That is interesting. I'll take a stab at it. And the other thing is the ship isn't colored like the rest of the deck, the Coleman Smith deck. It's the ship. You can see it. It's way over on the side of Mercy, but rather than being colored opaquely, it almost looks like a red scribble through it, like the ship has been canceled. There is something odd about that. And I would say that most people have a lot of trouble in these uncharted waters, which the imagination is. It's not charted yet. It hasn't happened yet. The king participates in that. He rules over it, but it is the queen that fully embodies it. Only they can do this. And when the mere mortals of the kingdom attempted, when other people attempted, it is at their own risk. I think it's a very dangerous thing when people not with the capacity of kings and queens try to imagine and plan a future for everybody else.
Why does he look towards the right?
He looks toward the right as compassion. This is, of course, the highest aspect of the suit of happiness and joy. And this is a compassionate king. This is a benevolent ruler. And although he sits right dead center in the middle of the card, which means he is neither too severe nor too merciful, he does give a nod in the direction of mercy. I suppose the idea that everybody deserves a second chance.
Could you comment on the position of his feet?
His feet are very strange, but I think they kind of really make a good point that this is a person whose aspect is water. He is comfortable in water. In fact, he's almost part fish. Water probably runs in his veins, seawater. This is just a level of comfort and confidence in his controlled imagination that other people wouldn't have.
Is he floating on some kind of island?
I don't know. I don't think he's floating. It just looks too stable. But of course, then if he's not floating, wouldn't all the waves be washing over it? So I don't understand. But again, um, he's master of the waters. The waters represent imagination, and they offer no danger to him. So we really don't know what the platform rests on, but it is a solid and safe platform.
Is this the most powerful king?
Well, that's interesting because all the kings represent the supreme power in our corporeal world. The kings would never battle each other because they're part of a complete and cohesive unit. You could say the King of Swords is the most powerful, but then we have to examine what is power. And the King of Swords would be the ability to destroy, and the King of Cups would be the ability to inspire and build. So, which is the greatest power? And in some ways, you might lean towards the King of Cups, but it's an interesting question. I don't really think it has an answer.
Do we still have have real examples of archetypical kings today?
Um, I think it's really difficult because you could judge a person by their actions, and you could make judgments too, just about the person by getting to know them a little bit. But today, the ability to masquerade has become just like a science almost. You can, um, in a sense, produce a person with a whole backstory, and it could be built out of just myth, and you could have that person appear to be much greater than they are. And we see this all the time. So uh, they've got to be still around. I think you'd probably look at somebody who was really charismatic. And I, I have, I think, met a couple of these people, and people follow them to the point where they have to be held responsible for other people. And I've seen some of these people say, I know that people will follow me, and I have to be careful because they will follow me into bad things as well as good things. So there's yeah, there are some kings, they're very rare, and some of us may have actually met one of them, but of course he wouldn't be wearing a crown, and he probably wouldn't have a palace or anything like that.
So that card, of course, doesn't represent actual royalty. We're talking about the concepts.
Yeah, the first kings weren't from bloodlines or something. They rose up in the society and were recognized.
Final thoughts.
Um, the only it was funny that question was asked because my final thought was just exactly what power is, and this is the king of happiness, and he is not a jester, he is not a clown, he's not an entertainer. This is a person who's a motivator and who brings out the highest aspect in people, and this is the king that will make a better world for tomorrow. And that's it for the cups. And next day, we'll move into the suit of coins, starting with the aces. Bye for now.